It is generally an easy task to introduce presidents. In this country, one simply says, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. This president requires a longer introduction because he has such an impressive list of credentials before him. He was born in 1946 in Asmara. He attended the University of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. From 1966 to 1968, he was a combatant in what was Africa's longest war. From 68 to 70, he was Deputy Division Commander of the Eritrean Liberation Front. In 70 and 77, he was a leader of the EPLF. In 77, he was elected Vice Secretary General. In 87, elected Secretary General of the Eritrean People's Liberation Front. 99 to 93, he served as Secretary General of the Provisional Government of Eritrea. And from 1993, he was elected President, Government of Eritrea by the Eritrean National Assembly. It is my great, great pleasure to introduce President Isaias. Mr. President.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We have called this conference to speak about the prospects for peace between Eritrea and Ethiopia, and to share with you my government's plans for the period between now and the peaceful resolution of our conflict with Ethiopia and beyond. 15 months almost have elapsed since the border conflict between Eritrea and Ethiopia came out to the open. The dispute actually started much earlier. At the very least, it goes back to July 1997, when Ethiopia began systematically and violated Eritrea's sovereignty and territorial integrity. But the international community was not aware about the problem, as Eritrea, considering the close relationships between the two countries, had sought to solve it amicably and bilaterally with Ethiopia. In the past 15 months, the conflict developed into the most devastating war anywhere in the world, pitting close to 500,000 soldiers on both sides, and with casualties running into the tens of thousands. Eritrea had from the outset believed that there could be no military solution to the conflict. It came up with a reasonable proposal for a peaceful solution and actively engaged the various parties, including the OAU, the United States government. Unfortunately, Ethiopia felt that it had the wherewithal to solve the problem militarily and in a very short time. That has proved elusive, and the international community, in particular the OAU, the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union, have been spurred by the ferocity of the war and the damage caused not only to the two countries but also to the region as a whole, to mount a more vigorous and closely coordinated peace effort. As a result of the realities on the ground and the serious international effort underway, the prospects for peace appear better than at any time in the past 15 months, and we are cautiously optimistic. Eritrea has already accepted the OAU peace plan, which has been endorsed internationally. The plan consists of 3 agreements: the framework for an agreement, the modalities for implementation, and the technical arrangements. I think I would jump to the final point. The positive developments in the Horn of Africa had contributed to a constructive engagement by the United States with Africa. The conflict between Eritrea and Ethiopia was a setback to that approach. In working indefatigably for peace with Ethiopia, Eritrea is determined to make its contribution, not only to the realization of the African objective of making the year 2000 the year of peace in Africa, but also in keeping alive U.S. interest in and constructive engagement with Africa. Thank you.
My name is John Donnelly from the Boston Globe. I was just in Asmara last week, and the feeling among Eritreans is that, very quietly said, is that your government has made mistakes as well in this. That there have been points along the way, such as when you didn't publicize the July 1997 developments with Ethiopia, that you could have done things that wouldn't have led to such a large-scale battle. Do you agree with that point of view? And number two,
I didn't get the
well, are there things that, do you accept some of the blame for this war becoming such a huge war? And number two, do you believe that some of the roots of this war are basically in a family feud that between you and your distant cousin? Do you see any of that?
I don't know if I've got your point, but I will try to give an answer to what I have understood to mean that 1997 was not the beginning of the conflict, as I have indicated in my introductory note. Observers who closely followed developments in the region would clearly see that 1997 was probably the time when the government of Ethiopia, or at least the administrative region of Tigray, officially announced a new border, or it came up with a document outlining the borders of that particular region. And according to the statement, the official statement, which was published in newspapers everywhere in the country, it took more than 3 years to prepare that map, meaning that the drawing of the map started in 1995, at least. Why would an administrative region in one of the regions of Ethiopia redraw international boundaries and start drawing boundaries without even the consent of the people who are concerned, the people of Tigray, the people of Ethiopia, and most of all, Eritrea and its own people? Now, we've been talking about the border issues for so many years before 1997. We had established committees at a regional level on the administrative areas on our borders or common borders. We finally formed a high-level commission involving the defense, security, and political institutions of both governments to find a solution to this issue. The Ethiopian government consistently was saying that it has not completed its study or research on the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia. One very paradoxical development at that time was the introduction of the new currency of Ethiopia. The new currency was introduced on the assumption that the older currency had a map of Ethiopia embossed in the currency, which included Eritrea as part of Ethiopia. Now, the new currency was introduced with a new map of Ethiopia. The new map of Ethiopia does not incorporate the new administrative map of the Tigray region, which was done since 1995 up until 1997. There was a clear contradiction on the approach of dealing with the border issue. There was no conclusive position made by the Ethiopian government when we had a number of committees working together to bilaterally and amicably find a solution to the problem. 1997 was the time where there were incursions, organized incursions of regular troops crossing the border, dismantling administration, and posting their own administrations. That triggered the problem. We did not overreact. We didn't react at all. My first reaction was to write a letter to the Prime Minister asking him to use his wisdom to refrain from using force to solve problems. And that was public at the time. That kind of using force to resolve the border issue continued. In 1998, January, again, another incident happened where troops had to move in, dismantle an administration in the southernmost tip of our country, and then impose their own administration. We complained, and we called for the Joint Commission to find a solution to that problem. It was not possible because we were told that the government and its institutions are working on a new document and trying to clearly identify where the borders of the two countries lie. We were waiting with patience. Unfortunately, things deteriorated. The government moved more to impose policies of repression, dismantling administration, removing populations from their village, which I think at the end of the day, 1998, provoked a reaction. And that reaction was not an overreaction to my understanding. We tried to show restraint, but again, the fact that the Parliament of Ethiopia on May 13th announced or declared war was what internationalized the issue. We didn't, even at that point, want to have the issue out of a bilateral engagement. I again called on the Prime Minister, asked him what the wisdom was to go to the Parliament, which doesn't know anything about the situation and the events, to declare war. It could have been resolved quietly, bilaterally, without making too much fanfare. Unfortunately, the choice of the government of Ethiopia was to declare war using the Parliament as a vehicle. And that was when the attention of the international community was called at the conflict. I hope I have tried to go beyond what I understood to be a question and answer our position as far as 1997 and the incidents are concerned. The second point was...
Do you see this? I understand what happened prior to 97, in 97, and I respect that. But do you see this as well as when this conflict started erupting, that the two governments, that your government and the government, and Ethiopia's government, could not resolve this in part because you were so close at one point that that's a fight in the family at all?
I don't know if I have an answer to that, but again, I have tried to give an explanation of the events prior to 1997 and after 1997. How that was influenced by the intimate relationship we had, I don't know.
Gregory Copley from Defence and Foreign Affairs Daily. Now that the accords seem to be in the offing, will Eritrea stop funding and supporting the Oromo Liberation Front and the EPRP and other internal Ethiopian groups?
I would be dealing with that question with the assumption that you're saying we are supporting the movements you mentioned. We are not supporting them. Our policies towards these organizations will not change the situation in Ethiopia in any way unless there is an internal circumstance that would be influencing the government, opposition political groups, and external intervention might not mean much. These groups have been there all the way. The Oromo were there 1995. After 1995, we worked hard. We worked together with the TPLF to bring about the involvement of the OLF in the transition. And after the transition, unfortunately, that did not work. The relationship fell apart, and the OLF withdrew, and that was it. The opposition groups everywhere in Ethiopia, in the Afar region, to mention. In fact, 1997, when Ethiopian troops had to move into Abadime, it was in hot pursuit of what they called was an opposition armed group in the Afar region. And we were asked to collaborate with the government to cordon that group that was fighting the government in the Afar region. The Somalis have been there fighting all the way, even though the events in the Ogaden were camouflaged or overshadowed by the problems in Somalia proper. These things have been there. The question now is not the military support these people are getting, it's the political solution that is required to allow the participation of all groups in Ethiopia, Oromos, Amharas, Tigrayans, Somalis, Afars, and other groups. Has the government been successful in doing that? This is not my business to comment about. Is the government willing to deal with these issues in a manner that will contribute to the stability of Ethiopia? Again, this is a business of the government in Addis Ababa. It's not our business to get involved in this matter. Tactically, people might assume that it's wise, it would benefit Eritrea to support these groups militarily at this point in time. We have said whatever we do, whatever we give in terms of moral support to these people will not change the reality in Ethiopia unless there is a situation which guarantees or warrants that a change should come by opposition forces or the government for that matter. Thank you.
Corson with CNN International. What is it that makes you cautiously optimistic? And do you think the Prime Minister of Ethiopia now works more closely with the Parliament to prevent things from becoming undone?
Well, I think we have a justifiable reason to be cautious about this matter. When the framework agreement came about, it was a general document with a number of issues that were ambiguous to our understanding, and we had to ask questions, and I think it was fair to say also that Ethiopia had reason to ask questions. The government in Ethiopia did not even raise questions at that moment. It readily accepted the document. We said we need time, we will have to ask questions because it was a general document. Now, leaving aside the developments of the last 12 months until the summit was held in Algiers, the modalities for the implementation clarified a number of issues. And we felt it was logical to accept the modalities. We already had accepted the framework in February, but again, the summit brought a document that clarified a number of issues and made it possible for both of us to see through the modalities that the implementation will take place in a clearly defined time frame and procedures. Now, finally, the OAU, the Algerian government, the United Nations, and the United States government brought in their experts, military, legal, political, and technical experts, to see that they produce a document. They called it the technical arrangements. The technical arrangements document has not left any stone unturned, to my understanding. It talks in detail. It's a very clear document. It wouldn't give Eritrea or Ethiopia any room for maneuver. The first minute I was handed over the document, it took me about 10 minutes to read the document, and I said, well, this is almost a perfect document, and there is no room for maneuvering, asking questions or demanding clarifications on any issue put in that document. I refrain from saying I accept the document because politically or as a matter of courtesy, I will have to say I will study the document with my experts and come back to you with an answer. I had to take time and go sleep for about 2 hours and come back again to tell the delegation that we officially have accepted the document. There was no reason to delay. We have 3 documents: the framework agreement, the modalities of implementation, and the technical arrangements, which includes details of implementing the arrangement. Now, Ethiopia is said to have asked time to study the document. They have put a number of questions. I don't exactly know the content of those questions. They still have not come up clear on their acceptance of this technical document. And that warrants a cautious optimism, in my opinion.
My name is Adanich. I'm from Voice of America. In fact, Ethiopia is saying that it doesn't believe Eritrea accepts the peace plan. Mr. Abai Tsahaye gave a speech to Ethiopian community last week, and he said that if Eritrea says it accepts it, it's because it's weakened, or maybe it's trying to get time. And he said Ethiopia's first option would be to continue with the preparation for war, and only if Eritrea accepts everything Ethiopia says, then the peace plan, Ethiopia could take it as a second option. And he said that, to use his words, Ethiopia must break Eritrea's spinal cord. And what's your response to that?
I don't know, I would be laughing and probably amusing myself about these statements that have come from Minister or Mr. Abai Tsahaye. Ethiopia does not believe. This is a perception on the part of Ethiopia. We have officially, through a written letter by me to the current chairman of the OAU and everybody else, accepted all the documents. Why can't the government of Ethiopia believe that Eritrea has accepted the documents put forward by everybody else? Why does he want to believe that Eritrea has not accepted these documents? What guarantees does he want to believe ultimately that Eritrea has accepted this document? As to the statements coming up, I don't take them seriously. The problem is this government banked on Eritrea's refusal or rejection of any arrangement for a peaceful solution. And this was again a perception. They wanted Eritrea to reject, to have a justification for continuing the war, misleading the Ethiopian people, and particularly the people in Tigray. They want a justification for continuation of war. Why? This is a domestic political problem for the government. The government wants a justification for its survival. It wants to continue to survive by telling people that there is an external threat, there is a conflict with Eritrea. We are not in the business of giving this government an excuse to mislead its people and continue to war. Now, whether Eritrea is weak or not is not the business of the government there. Why should they bother about our weakness or strength? It doesn't have any bearing on the substance of the matter that is put forward as a solution to the conflict we have, and that is a border conflict. Whether we are weak or strong doesn't matter. I think the events of the last 15 months have been very crystal clear, and I don't think there is anyone having the illusion to believe that Eritrea is weak at this point in time, and that's one of the reasons why it has accepted the modalities and the technical arrangement. I wouldn't be interested in talking about our capability to defend our sovereign country and our military capability in a number of issues. It doesn't make any sense at all. Talking about military capabilities and bragging about what one can do and what one cannot do does not make any sense at all. It's a senseless logic of people who have their own perceptions about this conflict. I wouldn't challenge Abai Sahai about what I could do on the ground militarily or what he could do on the ground. What does it mean, after all? Does it make any sense? We're talking about a solution to a conflict, a border conflict. And we'll have to deal with that without regards to whether the other party is militarily weak or strong, whether the other party has got planes, tanks, artillery on the ground. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I think any observer who's followed developments the last 15 months clearly knows the situation on the ground. I wouldn't bargain on the assumption that I am strong or weak militarily. I would like to find a way and judge the proposals coming from anywhere on their merits, not on my capability to defend or on my military resources. And again, the call for military preparation on the part of the TPLF regime in Ethiopia is an illusion.
Mr. President, my name is Frank Smythe from IntellectualCapital.com. Ethiopian diplomats say that the reason they believe that Eritrea has not accepted the OAU framework and the modalities is because Eritrea continues to demand compensation for Eritrean nationals and their property that's been confiscated as part of the deportees that were expelled from Ethiopia last year. So could you clarify for us, is Eritrea pursuing this demand parallel to the peace process, or is this a condition, as you see it, to the OAU plan and to the modalities?
Did you say that Eritrea has not accepted the framework agreement?
Ethiopian diplomats claim that Eritrea has not accepted the framework
Again, I would
because
like
of this
to correct that and say we have officially accepted the framework agreement in February through a written document to the then chairman of the OAU. We have accepted the modalities in public during the summit in Algiers. We have accepted the technical arrangements through an official letter sent to the current chairman of the OAU. Now, I don't think there is any illusion as far as that is concerned. Now, in Algiers, we mentioned that among other issues, because that is also mentioned in the framework agreement, the humanitarian aspect or the humanitarian dimension and the consequences of the conflict between the two countries is supposedly part of the deal or the arrangement as far as the framework is concerned. And we mentioned the fact that we have more than 60,000 of our population expelled illegally from Ethiopia, innocent civilians expelled, but again, the sad thing about their expulsion is that they were humiliated, and their property, which amounts to about $800 million, is confiscated. Whether that is part of the deal or not, I wouldn't bother about the border issue. The border issue could be resolved by demarcation or by what we can now see as a technical arrangement for the resolution. But this case remains to be unresolved. There are 60,000 people expelled illegally and their property confiscated. We have the right and an obligation to all the time raise this issue. This is not a precondition. It will not be a precondition now. It will not be a precondition tomorrow, as we would like to see the border demarcated without preconditions. But again, we will raise this matter as a matter of human rights, a matter of right for every citizen living in Ethiopia to have his property and family and livelihood protected. When this conflict is resolved by delimitation or demarcation, we will be asking the question again. We have to defend our citizens. We have to ask for the compensation of the money and the assets confiscated by this government. We have to ask for their human rights, their humiliation, the separation of families, the imprisonment and detention of family members, the dismemberment of communities will have to be raised, and we will continue to raise this matter, not as a precondition, but as a basic humanitarian issue and an issue of human rights.
Good afternoon, Voice of America. You both claim to have accepted the peace plan in principle, but it appears that both countries are still engaging in a propaganda war. You've just told, laid out some, points, accusations against Ethiopia. If we go back last week, the ICRC claimed that Ethiopia had allowed them access to Eritrean prisoners of war, but Eritrea hasn't returned that courtesy. So it seems there's a dissonance between what you're claiming and what you're actually doing.
I think that there is a way of understanding the situation. You would like to understand it that both parties have not accepted, both parties have done this and that, both parties are doing this and that. I mean, you have to be fair in your judgment for your own integrity, for your own credibility to say that this is black and this is white, this is right and that is wrong. Now, there is no reason why one should mix the issue of the ICRC with the present conflict. I don't see any reason. In that, I have heard a statement coming from the president of the ICRC who never mentioned to me that he wanted to see the prisoners of war on our side. He never mentioned it. He went to Addis and a statement came from the ICRC saying that the president was allowed to see prisoners of war, not all of them, in Ethiopia, Eritrean prisoners of war, but was not allowed to see Ethiopian prisoners of war. I met him early in the morning. I was asked to fly and travel for miles to see him at about 9 o'clock in the morning. He never mentioned to me anything about prisoners of war. But again, that does not it has no bearing on the issue at stake, the conflict between Eritrea and Ethiopia. We should bring about issues that have no relevance to the main issue and try to confuse people or obscure the real issues from imaginations and unreal issues. If the ICRC has to deal with us and is asking for us to sign the convention, this is not the time to discuss about the convention. It's none of their business to oblige us to talk about the convention. The convention is another matter. I know a number of states who are violating their people's human rights, violating international law by mistreating prisoners of war. We have the best and the most excellent track record as far as prisoners of war are concerned. We have released a number of prisoners early as a sign of good gesture to the Ethiopian government. No prisoner of war from our army has been released on the part of Ethiopia. We have more than 1,500 Eritreans under detention, civilians, students as well. No one has talked about this matter. Whenever you point a finger at Eritrea or Ethiopia, be fair in your judgment and your assessment about who is accepting and who is not accepting, who is doing right and who is doing wrong.
My name is Mawa. I'm from Gafat Ethiopia newspaper organization. My question is, this press has been pressing you and the Ethiopian Prime Minister Meles Zenawi that you are the most high IQ leaders of Africa, and you are going to bring peace to Africa. You are the light of Africa, and we have been hearing this in this room and elsewhere. But the war that has, in Mengistu's time, we said Mengistu was a monster. He brought us war, bloodshed, and we cried for freedom and peace for Africa, for Ethiopia. And when you two came, to power, we were expecting peace and stability and unity, not even for Ethiopia, for the whole of Africa. But what comes now is war, bloodshed, disappearance, detentions, and it is not the wish of the Eritrean people and the Ethiopian people. It is a wish, the conflict of the two leaders. It's not the wish of the two nations. It is the wish of two. When the leaders are in conflict, we push the people to go to war. Nobody has asked Ethiopian people, do they wish to go to war for a piece of land? Anybody ask the Eritrean people, do they want war because of a piece of land? No. It is our leaders. And we beg you two leaders to stop this war. We don't want war, we want peace, we want unity, not only for Ethiopia, Eritrea, but it is for the whole of Africa. We have to be united. How many years and how many centuries can we go for war? And I think both of you have shown us not what we expected. It has to change. We can't go like this. It's a disaster.
I have no comment. No problem. I have said enough to not deal with this matter.
Mr. President, my name is Talal Haj from Al Jazeera satellite channel in Qatar. What are the prospects of you two meeting, two leaders of Ethiopia and Eritrea, and working out your conflicts? My second question about the port of Assab. The original agreement to stipulate for free access for the Ethiopian. Now Ethiopians are also accusing you for reneging on this. What's the prospect of allowing them free access through the new agreement? Thank you.
On the first question, I think I won't dwell on details, but I can assure you that at the height of the conflict in mid-1998, May, after even the Ethiopian parliament declared war, we were talking over the telephone with the Prime Minister, we were exchanging faxes. Suddenly, that was interrupted. The Prime Minister did not want to talk to me when he said he didn't want to see the color of the eyes of, or he doesn't like the color of the eyes of Eritreans. That was his statement. Again, now, if there is an opportunity for any meeting, I wouldn't be shying from any meeting. Why should I? I have no reason, I have no problem. If I have a case to make, I would meet not only the Prime Minister or any official. We have made our position clear on a number of occasions that at any level, when there is a meeting desired or organized, we would be there. We're not trying to make a PR point on this matter. If it's useful in bringing about a solution to this problem, if it can bring about the normal relationship to the right track, we don't have any problem as far as meetings. Face to face, I'm not scared to see the Prime Minister in the eye. I don't have any problem there. The second question is, Assab was a free port. Massawa was a free port to Ethiopia. This was declared early in 1991. We believe this port should be free not only for Ethiopia, for everybody else who wants to use them. That's our policy. It's not a problem of conflict. It wouldn't be a cause of any conflict. Any sensible person who believes that there is a country landlocked and one has gotten access to the sea, why shouldn't the complementarity of the interests of both countries demand or dictate the free use of these ports? And with globalization taking everyone else by surprise, I don't see why the issue of ports should become a problem. It's never been a problem since 1991. It's not a problem now. It wouldn't be any problem in the future. It was the Ethiopian government which boycotted our ports and shifted to Djibouti. We said it's their choice. They boycotted our airports and cut any ties between the two countries. It was not our choice, but it was dictated upon us and we had to accept it. They closed the borders earlier, 1997, with the assumption that trade liberalization between the two countries is not to the benefit of Ethiopia. Despite the fact that we disagreed, we accepted this conditionality. When they were putting police and militias across the border to control trade between the two countries, we were against the idea of controlling trade between the two countries. If a time comes when we have to open these borders and liberalize trade between the two countries, open the ports, airports for Ethiopia, the same thing for us, we wouldn't be losers. Neither would the Ethiopian people be losers in this circumstance. And we know what we are doing, we know where we are going, and we would be sensible enough to say that these ports don't have any meaning as far as Eritrea allowing Ethiopia is concerned. It would serve the long-term purpose of economic integration in the area. It would bring the two peoples together and closer. That's our conviction, and we will continue to work on that, even though we now are in a situation of conflict, and probably the situation of conflict is giving the impression that this is a conflict to stay for so many generations to come. I don't think that's going to be true.
Can I follow up on that woman's question? I'd like to again press you on that. Would you comment on her statement? Because the first thing on the lips of everyone in Washington who follows this is the same. Let me just finish. Is the same.
I didn't want to embarrass her by saying that, again, both leaders have caused this conflict. I think she's an Ethiopian. She knows better how this conflict has come about. Who triggered the conflict? We had and we still have the right to defend ourselves. Any action on our part has been in self-defense. We have not declared war. We have not gone to the parliament to declare war. We have not tried to change and redraw the borders that were there because of colonial arrangements. We were not even consulted. Our people were not consulted when these arrangements were made. And the OAU accepts the colonial boundaries as sacrosanct. We accept these borders. Changing the borders is a problem. Eritrea did not redraw borders, never. Ethiopia, or the government in Ethiopia, and not even the Ethiopian population. A small group pretending to represent the people of Tigray began redrawing borders. And the point should be, the finger should be pointed at these people. They declared war. They went to the parliament to declare war. We did not declare war. And again, the finger should be pointed at these people. They have gone beyond limits, and there were a number of incursions that could be proved by independent investigation. The use of force was continually used by the other side. We had to defend ourselves. In fact, we did not react as I was trying to explain earlier. So I think I felt maybe I have answered the question. I need not go and embarrass my sister saying that you are not being fair in your judgment. You have to call a spade a spade. And it's not a question of leaders fighting each other without consulting their people. The government in Ethiopia tells us that it went to the parliament when it declared war. And the parliament is supposed to be representative of the people of Ethiopia. And when we decided to defend ourselves, we had to go to the parliament and say, this war is a senseless war, and we need to act in self-defense only. And we've been acting in self-defense, so there is no reason why one should slice a finger and try to make it look as if it's pointing at two people at the same time.
I think, though, can I just follow up? I think at the heart, I'm sorry, do you mind? I think at the heart of her question is that there, that both yourself and Prime Minister Meles were such lights of Africa, and whether you feel that you bear some responsibility for what has happened.
Whether it's good or bad, we bear responsibility. There is no question about that. But ultimately, we'll have to share responsibilities by assuming those responsibilities on the credentials of our action on the ground.
This is Michi Yamada with Reuters. Is this your first trip to the United States? And could you describe who you're going to see in Washington and what's your expectation from this trip in the United States?
I don't think this is my first trip to the United States. I've been here in this town a number of times. I'm here because I was invited by the community in this town, the United States and North America at large. And my business is to talk to the community here. I've had a nice evening on Saturday talking to these people, and that's my business, at least for now.
You said community, so I think
Very
so
true.
that
You're not meeting with U.S. officials.
I have no intention. I have no arrangements. I don't know. But again, this is an unofficial stay in Washington, and whenever I'm allowed or given the opportunity to meet any official from the United States government, I would be more than happy to do that.
The Horn of Africa has been embroiled in conflict. Both Eritrea and Ethiopia receive quite a bit of food and donor aid Last week, Mr. Annan made an appeal for more donor money to come into these areas. Now, I would just like to pursue the question of responsibility. Where does this lie, considering that this war, this conflict, has gone on for 15 months, and neither country can afford to have such a war or, reserve the right to defend themselves? It just seems futile when people are dying from disease, lack of food and sanitary water. It just seems like misplaced priorities.
It's good talking like that here in Washington, but the reality is the reality. I'm not pretending to be aloof and not see the reality that is there. You're bitter about the situation, I'm bitter about the situation, everybody else is bitter about the situation we have not only in the Horn of Africa but all over the continent. How are we going to find a solution to these problems? Why are we going into conflict? Why are we squandering resources when we have some other business to do? Why and why and why? A number of questions could be raised. I have been asking these questions myself. A number of our citizens have been asking this question. We have tried to look beyond the conflict and look into other businesses which are the responsibilities we have towards our own populations. I agree with you to say the least that we are not in need of fighting a war now. Why this war has come about is another issue, and you will have to do your own independent investigation to find out why this conflict came about. That's a separate matter. But was this a necessity? Did we need to go into war between Eritrea and Ethiopia when we could have worked together to solve other problems and solve our problems before anything else? Was there a necessity for this war? I say this was a senseless war. It was not justified by any standard, but it was there and we had to face it. Whether the question is, do we like the war or do we like what has happened or what is happening? No, we don't like it. That's why we're looking for a peaceful settlement to this conflict. There are other problems, hunger, famine, disease. Pretensions will not solve the problem, in my opinion. We need to face the reality and find a solution for every problem we see all over the continent.
On that note, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you all for coming. We much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Julie.